Hey, Sub here. So, today has been a really busy day in the world of Call of Duty. Aside from the fact that ranked is still not working, we have had some big developments in the anti-cheat department, specifically in the litigation department. Um, Charlie Intel has made a couple of tweets, a couple of posts, specifically one post that I don't have up that was all about how they have served cease and desist letters to a variety of hardware um, hardware manufacturers that were circumventing the system, i.e., the Cronus and the Zim and those sorts of developers. And that was been greeted, with pretty good news, but everyone's kind of skeptical about the effectiveness of it, myself included. However, still good to see them try. The other post, and this is the one that really caught my attention, I've got it up here from Charlie Intel saying Activision has filed a lawsuit against a group of individuals responsible for cheats and cheat devices distribution and manufacturing, seeking a jury trial for interfering with their Call of Duty IP. Okay. That's interesting. And that caught my attention because lawsuits are always better than words, right? They can say whatever they want in a blog post, but until they put pen to paper and file it in court, it doesn't mean as much, right? Cease and desist is just a threat. It is a threat from Activision to do something if you don't comply. That's what it means. It isn't it isn't a court order, right? Because anybody can file, can send someone a cease and desist. That's all that, anybody can do it. Filing in court is what's important, right? So when someone doesn't listen to a cease and desist, you can file in court, or you can just straight up file in court. So the fact that he posted this and shared, this image of the top line of a court case caught my attention, and I couldn't find anything about it. I looked, no one reported on it, no one has talked about it. And so I did a lot of digging, found the case, and was able to actually get access to the PDF version of the complaint. And I want to go through it here with you today. I want to talk about what it means, what they're doing, and what's going to happen with Call of Duty and everybody going forward. Now, Charlie Intel says that it's a group of individuals responsible for cheats and cheat devices distribution and manufacturing, and that's not true. This is actually far more interesting. One of the big complaints that we've had is that when Activision sends these cease and desists, and I've reported on this before, companies will shut down their cheats and then just give the code to someone else, rebrand it, and take a piece of that business, right? Or they just rebrand it completely and start over. Now, I said a few months ago when I first talked about this, I pointed out that when you are being issued a cease and desist like this, it carries a lot more weight post engine owning, Activision v engine owning, than it did in years past. And that's simply transferring the stuff, doing all those hoops, unless you can get yourself out of the jurisdiction accessible to the United States government. If they use RICO charges, which they did in engine owning, they have great reach and can get at your assets all over the world. Okay, there's only a few other places you can go that won't listen. One of them is Russia, and that's where engine owning ended up. So in this case, what's the actual suit? Well, when you get into the statement, here's where it gets important. They are actually going after a cheat provider that had previously shut down. So in this case, they had I talked about this before. They actually got Lergware to shut down. And it turns out what Lergware did is they shut down and rebranded as GameHook, and they gathered together some friends. The owner of Lergware got some friends together and said, and so here's the defendant, David Rotholtz, got some friends together, said, let's restart. And they launched this new one, GameHook, which was basically just a rebrand. Okay. So Activision did their due diligence, did some research, connected the dots, and now they're suing everybody. Okay. They're suing them in California, which is not good for, anybody, because California loves this stuff. California courts love this stuff. You basically say we accuse you of harming our business, creating these hacks. So basically what their main claims are is they're actually trafficking and circumvention devices, which is a DMC violation. And that would be them breaking, that's their software, their loaders, things that break the anti-cheat and allow them to go undetected. They sold they sold the software specifically to circumvent the anti-cheat systems. Okay. They have a violation of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act in there. The cheat software allowed users to damage or disrupt COD servers without authorization. And I believe it was a DDoS attack that they were able to execute through that. Is I believe specifically what they mentioned in there. Intentional interference with contractual relations. The cheats caused players to violate Activision's terms of service and terms of use. So, by giving software, selling software to or access to software to a customer, they've enabled that customer to break that contract that they signed when they made their account. Therefore, they're that's where that charge comes from. Unfair competition. So they are profiting unlawfully from software that's harming Activision's games and reputation is the charge on that one. And there's a few other ones in there. And they talk about how Lergware and GameHook both included features like aimbot, wall hacks. There were toxic behaviors like you could crash servers or kick players. And specifically, what really screws these guys over if they don't win and but is going to put them in a very bad spot is that the main guy, David Roholitz, I don't know how to say his name, but Roholitz initially agreed to cease his activities after receiving a cease and desist letter. But because he received that, he acknowledged that he was in the wrong. He didn't challenge it. He didn't fight it. And then he went and continued to create and help create GameHook and help pay that. That puts him in a really bad spot from a legal, from a court standpoint. So he's individually going to kind of catch it, but he's also dragged all of his buddies. So I think they named like 10 or 12. I think they had like 5 different people they named. Some of them by legal names, some by their usernames. And then there's a handful of other people they kind of reserve spots for. Like, we're going to figure out who these guys are. There's other people, and we're gonna hit them too. We're gonna bring them into this one once we figure it out. And so they have gone through and they've basically are just going straight at it. There's 25 pages of this. I'm not gonna try and go through all of them. I want to hit the important parts, but specifically, I want to talk about what they're after. So Activision is after injunctive relief. So they want the court to order them to stop doing stuff. All right. They want monetary damages. And that involves statutory damages. So statutory damages are kind of damages prescribed in law, right? So like if you break the, it's like a speeding ticket, right? If you go over the speed limit, you get a ticket. The ticket is this much. Okay. But then they want punitive damages. Now, punitive damages are the ones that really hurt because they're going to take all the actual, so that you get the damage for the ticket, right? The money that you have to pay for doing the thing you did. Then you've damaged Activision. And they have a lot of different things. I want to kind of break down some of the ways that they can go after them with damages on this. But basically, they can go after lost revenue from people who quit the game or didn't buy anything and didn't play. They can go after their profits from the sales. And they can go after the cost of going after them and enforcing it, right? How much do they have to invest in the anti-cheat to make all this work? They can get them for that too. And so then so those are like a lot of active damages, and there's punitive damages, which are basically you did this on purpose. And so now we're going to take the cost of all of the damage you've done to Activision, and we're going to multiply it, right? And actually punish you and set an example for everybody else of what will happen if you guys, continue to break the law and do this. I say break the law. It's a civil. This is civil, so it's not criminal, and I think that needs to be made clear. I say break the law, but in reality, they're pursuing this as a civil matter, right? So no one's going to jail yet. they can also impound, the court can like impound and destroy, all of their code, all of their, anything that could be related to it. They could take their computers, their phones, all that stuff, like wipe that out. They can destroy all of that. And then of course, you get attorney's fees and all the good stuff in there. So at the end of the day, what's the risk for Lergware and, whatever what are these hackers doing? What is at risk for them? So if they lose, and they lose everything, right? There's kind of a range, and it's going to, there's a lot of things that depends, right? So the statutory damages, basically the DMCA damages is going to cost is the base fine is $2,500 per violation. So if you think, I think in the complaint, they said they had about 1,000 customers, which, that's 1,000 customers at $2,500 per customer, every customer is a violation, is going to be like 2.5 million right off the top. Then you have the issue of unfair competition and interference. So how much money did Activision lose over this? And they're estimating it could be anywhere from, they're kind of saying anywhere from $50 to $300 a license, per customer. And so, if you kind of like take a guess, like maybe somewhere in the middle, about $150, I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead. This is the profits, right? This is basically how much did they make off of this? And so you're looking at like, on a monthly license, they kind of estimate about $150 a user times 1,000 users. So, I mean, it's a lot. So 150 grand, give or take, just from the profits they made on it. And then and that number can kind of go up depending on how many of these lifetime things were sold. And then actual damages. So this one's a little more ballparky, but if you have to take into consideration, you have anti-cheat updates, you have the moderation, you have all the legal action and the legal costs, involved with hunting them down, customer service issues, like, whatever the company had to, put forth resource-wise is going to cost them. And that, I mean, that can hit $250,000 to $750,000 easy. And then you get the punitive damages. And so a lot of times, they go after what are called treble damages in a lot of these. Otherwise it's like 2x damages. There's kind of a range, depends on what it is, but it could be a lot, right? So if you look at the costs, right, and the actual damages that Activision took in, and you multiply that by 2 or 3, you get, a range. I mean, they could easily tack $2 million on this already. And then the legal fees, right? The loser is going to pay the legal fees for the winner. So you're going to throw that in the book, and that's going to be, $500,000 easy. So at the end of the day, to make about, the complaint says this last year they've made about 150 grand. To make 150 grand, they're risking between $4 and $6 million. And here's the kicker. I did some digging. From what I can tell, I think these people live here in the US. Unlike Enginoni, who were foreign and could hide themselves pretty well, and kind of avoid, a lot of the strict legal repercussions. These guys are not, from what I understand. At least some of them are here in the US, and that's not good for them. So at the end of the day, it's going to be an interesting case. I think it's going to be open and shut. I don't think these guys have a great chance at like walking on this, because specifically because they started with one, received the cease and desist, responded to it publicly, and then rebranded. And this is going to be the penalty for rebranding, right? So everybody, so the big argument has been, well, you can cease and desist somebody, they'll just rebrand, and who cares, right? They don't go away. Activision is putting their foot down and saying, well, we're going to make them go away, and these guys are going to be the hammer, the nail that gets hit that everybody gets to see. And so I hope they get the book thrown at them, right? And getting rid of this, getting out from under this is not going to be easy if they don't win the case. And I don't see a path for them to win it personally. I'm not a lawyer, but I know lawyers, and I stayed at a Holiday Inn once. So, I'm capable of reading the tea leaves of what I see in this. And so I don't see a good way out. Like if you're the kind of guy who went and resold cheats and kind of went down that road, that's, this is hopefully one of those things that these guys get nailed to the wall and a lot of people throw their hands up and say, forget it, I'm not going to do it anymore. It probably will take a couple more to actually drive that home. However, it's a good start. It's a W effort. And it's, again, a follow-up, a direct, causal relationship from winning engine owning. And so I think as long as we can keep, as long as Activision and Microsoft, and really this is Microsoft keeps their foot on the gas and keeps putting pressure on everybody that's in this cheat environment, we will hopefully start to see the big providers kind of pack up and leave, and or their customers kind of get tired of getting, of having to bounce around and just kind of give up and go do something else. Like that's the hope. Will we see it? I mean, at least this provider looks like they're going to be done for. But we'll see what goes on forward if they keep this up. And I think that's the critical part with all of this is Activision/Microsoft has to keep the pressure up. They have to keep pushing. They can't stop. And as long as they keep the pressure up, we should see improvement over time. It's already better now than it was 3 months ago. And it's better 3 months ago than it was 5 years ago, the last time we were in Verdansk. Okay. So we are making improvements, but we need to see the improvements go longer, and we need to see them be more aggressive. And we're seeing that. That's what we're seeing. So let's hope that continues. That's what I have for you. Wanted to put that out there. I will put a link to Charlie Intel's tweet. You can check that out. I'll put a link to my other video on the topic down below if you want to check the rest of the anti-cheat update out. Otherwise, thanks for sticking in. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you on the next one.